The new 6th generation Toyota 4Runner, the most controversial car of the year. I can't think of anything more controversial except for the time when I was 12 years old and wore a bear sweater to Green Bay, and then some man came up to me and called me an incomprehensible nerd. But are the guys hating on this car online actually right? Well, we've owned this car for some time now. Let's find out. Owning it. We own this 4Runner. We bought this car just under 2 weeks ago from California for its sticker price of over $58,000. And in the past 2 weeks, we have done a ton with this car. We've road tripped it, we've taken it off-road, we've towed with it, and I've lived with it in the city. So I think I know a thing or two about what it's like owning this new 4Runner, at least initially. Now look, if you guys want some more perspectives about what it's like owning a 4Runner, you have to check out the 4Runner 6G forums. It's an engaged group of owners and enthusiasts that are there to talk, discuss, and argue all about the new 6th generation 4Runner. But we're gonna dive right into the hornet's nest and talk about this turbocharged engine. Now the old 4-liter V6 lasted forever, but it sounded like a cow. It was kind of when you accelerated. But on the plus side, it performed like a cow too. Now those be some fighting words, as the kids say, but you have to understand the perspective and where I'm coming from. You see, we live here in Colorado at 6,000 feet above sea level, and the higher you go in elevation, the worse naturally aspirated engines do. And driving many thousands of miles in the 5th generation 4Runner, it wasn't great, especially where we live. It's a lot of full throttle and a lot of engine screaming. And that's when they're stock. When you put a lift and bigger tires on them, they just don't work very well on mountain highways like Interstate 70. Most of the controversy surrounding this all new generation of 4Runner is surrounding the engine, because they went from a V6 to a 4-cylinder turbo. And I'm happy to say that this new 4-cylinder turbo sounds like an anemic cow. It's really not very good. It's kind of harsh and unrefined sounding. However, this is going to be the hot take of the video. This is a phenomenal engine to drive compared to the outgoing V6. Now this engine makes peak torque 317 pound-feet, by the way, at just 1700 RPM. So it's got a ton of low-end grunt, which means passing as well as off-road performance is far better than the old 4-liter. It just is so much more responsive. There is never a lag, there's never a wait. You just put your foot on the throttle and it accelerates. And yes, it is a little bit unrefined in the sound department, but it really moves. And that's what matters in a vehicle of this class, in my opinion. Look, if I'm buying a Supra or a GR86, a sports car where a lot of the experience is driven by the engine, then yeah, I want it to be exciting and have great personality. But in this category of vehicle, I want it to be torquey, powerful, and relatively unintrusive. And this engine does all of that. Probably one of the biggest changes besides the engine is the transmission. It went from a 5-speed to an 8-speed, so it's actually willing to work with the engine now instead of constantly fighting it. The reason so many people bought the old 4Runner is, of course, reliability, because that 4-liter is legendary, and for good reason. And a lot of folks think and feel that this 2.4-liter turbo is a little bit unproven, right? But you gotta understand, this is not a new engine to the Toyota family. This engine's been in the Lexus NX 350 for going on 4 years now. It's been in the Highlander for going on 3 years now. And we're not talking volumes of 5, 10, 50,000. We're talking hundreds of thousands of vehicles. It was even in the Lexus RX. It's been out for a number of years now as well. So this engine is proving itself slowly. Now, we don't know what it's gonna be like in 350,000 miles like we do with the old 4-liter, but there have been very few complaints with this powertrain in those products, and I am slowly getting more and more confident recommending this engine for long-term use. It seems to be holding up pretty well. One of the big changes for the new 6G 4Runner is you can get it with a hybrid. Now, typically hybrids deliver far better fuel economy than their gas-only equivalents. The issue is When you put a hybrid system in a big chunk of a car like this 4Runner, it only delivers a couple better MPG combined. It's actually worse on the highway than the standard gasoline one, albeit slightly better in the city. And then you gotta find places to put that battery, which means that the hybrid 4Runner loses out on some cargo volume. So for me, even though that hybrid has 465 pound-feet of torque, the performance of the standard engine and the fuel economy is good enough to warrant just getting the normal car. Regardless, it's going to be a lot better than the old 5th gen. One area Toyota didn't improve the 4Runner is in ride quality. I find it to be a little harsh, but more jittery than anything. It doesn't do well over small bumps. It kind of makes the chassis feel a little bit nervous. Now, initially I thought it was air pressure, so I checked the factory air pressure, and yeah, it was right. It's right on the money. I mean, I think my first kind of plan of attack with this would be to change the rubber. I'd like to try it on a more expensive tire and see how that performs. It's not a deal breaker for me, but it is the suspension's a little busy, I'll put it to you that way. The plus side of driving this car on a road trip is the seats are very, very good. Now, this is the premium version of the TRD off-road 4Runner, so we get these nice premium feeling seats, but they're well bolstered, they're well cushioned, and they are far, far better than the outgoing 4Runner. It's one of the highlights of the interior for me. Plus, they're ventilated. Now, the old 4Runner had ventilation as well, but it was like a fat man blowing on your bottom with a straw. Like, it was just a gentle of cold air. This is a genuine ventilation that actually feels pretty cold on your bum. This new 4Runner can tow up to 6,000 pounds, which is 1,000 pounds more than the old 4Runner. Now, we've run this car up our Ike Gauntlet, the world's toughest towing test already, and Andre said this thing performed like an absolute dream. The power was good, the grade control was good, the shift transmission programming was good. It's a really good towing vehicle, and that's something I could simply never say about the old one, at least where we live at altitude. The premium TRD off-road has this enormous screen, something like a 14-inch screen, and it is far improved over the old one. Initially, I didn't love the Toyota UI when it first debuted, but it's really grown on me and I find it easy to use. So we have these shortcuts along the left side of the screen for things like music, phone, and of course, Apple CarPlay, which is fully wireless, but I find it quick, easy to use, and overall just a decent interface. I gotta give credit to Toyota. When the system came out, I didn't love it, but over the years, it really seems to have gotten a lot better. I do wish from a tech standpoint though, that this car came with a 4-wheel drive auto setting. So we've got 2 high, 4 high, and of course 4 low, but having an automatic 4-wheel drive or full-time all-wheel drive setting is a great option for those that live in a snowy environment. Now you can get it on the 4Runner, but it is really limited to the very top trims. The 4Runner has pretty decent visibility out the side. It's got these fairly low sills, and you know, it feels relatively airy. This one has the optional sunroof, so it doesn't feel claustrophobic, but forward visibility is limited. This vehicle has a tall hood, and it doesn't even have the hood scoop. It's just the normal hood, and I would like to see, you know, in future iterations of this car, a lower hood design where it's easier to see what's directly in front of the car. It's kind of like driving a full-size truck, and that makes it feel a little bit cumbersome in the city. The back seat of the 4Runner. Look, this is a typical front seat riding position for someone about 6 feet tall. The headroom, actually pretty good. The legroom is just about adequate. I think that's how I would describe this rear seat. It's not exemplary, it's not terrible, it's just perfectly fine. It does have a couple of nice things back here. We have 2 vents, which is great for your furry friends like Blaze, my dog, that gets very hot in the summer. And we also have USB-C ports and a little fairly useless plug. It's only rated to up to 400 watts. Now, when we talk about what these rear seats can do, there's a couple of layers of functionality here. So first, they do fold, and you can, you know, drive around in this position. The problem is you have a really big step down into the trunk. So you can also, if I do this again, there we go, pivot them forward for a more flat floor. This whole setup's a little bit of a mess. I'd much rather see them just give me this and then have a flat floor instead of doing this pivot, which is very late 90s, early 2000s. I think that could be better engineered. One more nice thing back here, a couple of cup holders, but you also get quite a bit of recline so your passengers can get a little bit more comfy. Toyota, other than the jittery ride, nailed the driving dynamics of this new 4Runner. So the steering is one of the highlights. Now, I spent a lot of time in this job driving Broncos and Wranglers, and we've owned Broncos and Wranglers, and I love them, but on the road, this is so much more refined. The steering is very good. It's very precise, and it gives you great response even off center, which I'm really pleased about. And also there is the lack of noise that comes into the cabin because it's a fixed roof versus a Bronco or Wrangler that have open tops. And then we come to the safety tech. Toyota kind of nailed it. Adaptive cruise, lane centering, blind spot monitoring, emergency braking. I mean, it's got all of it, and it all works so well. They have it dialed in, and pretty much everything in that standpoint is standard as well. So I'm really glad to see Toyota's commitment to safety. I'm going to come back to it, but the most controversial thing I said at the beginning is my favorite part about this new 4Runner, and it's the powertrain. The transmission tuning is dialed in. When we had this thing off-road in Moab, it holds gears and it holds them long enough where it doesn't feel like it's trying to upshift for fuel economy. On the road, it's smooth, it doesn't sound good, but it's unintrusive, and it feels effortless. That is what the new 4Runner does that the old 4Runner never felt like, at least at elevation. It just wafts you along with wave after wave of torque. The drivability of this car is amazing, and the off-road capability, I was just blown away with this 2D off-road we had in Moab. None of this video is sponsored. We paid our own money. Toyota didn't give us this car or any brakes. The dealer didn't give us any brakes, but it's so good. Like, it's a smooth, quick, comfortable driving car. Something that hasn't been the case for a lot of generations of 4Runners. The biggest problem with the 4Runner, and I hate to keep harping on it, but it's gotta come down to the price. Now, what Toyota's done is on the base end, they're like, look, it's basically the same price. It hasn't gotten more expensive. But then as you start ramping up the trim walk, the upper end 4Runners, or even the midline like this one, have gotten significantly more expensive. Apples to apples, TRD off-road premium, 24 to 25. This thing's about $8 more expensive. That's a lot of money. It really is. And I know that all cars are too expensive in 2024, but especially if you want to get one now when you're potentially facing markups of $1,000, $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, $6,000, it's just a little bit too expensive. Having said that, the daily livability of this vehicle far exceeds the 5th generation. It is so much more refined, the technology is so much better, and from a drivability standpoint, this powertrain rocks. It really is very good. So I've been very impressed with this car, just less impressed with the price. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. If you think of Cole behind the camera, head over to alltfl.com where we've got more 4Runner videos coming.